song. Of course, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, couldn't keep her mouth shut. She said, "Why, everyone knows I am the most beautiful of all, so the golden apple must be mine." Eris, the goddess of discord, was happy she had got what she wanted. The three candidates, sorry, goddesses, went before Zeus. That's funny. He says, "Sorry, goddesses." Because some people actually believe that these people or these figures were gods and goddesses. That's cognitive dissonance. These figures represented principles that we must understand, just like Jesus represented a principle. The god Ra represented a principle. You know, which let's keep in mind that the word God is younger than the principle itself. So when you consider some of these beings or entities to be gods, you're completely missing the point of what's being told. And going back to the story, of course, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, couldn't keep her mouth shut. She said, "Why, everyone knows I am the most beautiful of all, so the golden apple must be mine." Now, the three candidates, goddesses, went before Zeus to ask for his opinion. Poor thing, Zeus, he was was in a very delicate position. One of the contestants was his wife, another was his sister, and the third was his daughter. So he decided to just wash his hands and sent them with the messenger god Hermes to Mount Ida, which we know that Mount Ida is reference to the Ida and Pingala of the brain, or I mean of the Kundalini, where the shepherd Paris had to decide. So Hermes dumps this stuff off on Paris. Paris has to make the decision. Now that's just showing you how government works. As above, so below. These people are supposed to be gods. But basically government works the same way. We just push down the blame until we find us a victim, a fall guy. And that's who Paris became. Paris was the son of Primus or Priam, I thought was his name, king of Troy and Hecuba. When he was born, his mother had a dream in which her son destroyed the city. That's why his father decided to abandon him on Mount Ida, where he was raised by a bear. I mean, this stuff gets deep. When he grew up, he became a shepherd. He was the one named by Zeus to choose the most beautiful among the goddesses, a task so difficult that Zeus himself didn't feel up to it. Now, I'm going to tie this into another myth. If people are familiar with the Bible, you may be familiar with the fact that King David, who was the son of Jesse, and the priest Samuel, God sent the priest Samuel to anoint David, but he didn't know who he was looking for. And Jesse presented him with all of his sons, right? All of the different sons were presented to Samuel. God kept telling Samuel, "That's not the one, that's not the one." So finally, Jesse says, "Oh, I have one more son, David. He's the shepherd." And that's what David was doing, was tending the sheep on the side of a hill, just like this story about Paris. I mean, these myths, they tie to each other. You have to keep in mind that people didn't have TVs or radios or anything like that back in the day, back at this time. You know, they really weren't into sports big like that. So the way they entertained themselves was to constantly tell these stories, read these stories, and these stories ended up getting intermingled in different ways, and that's obvious. If you read any mythology, you'll see just like all this stuff ties together. This stuff ties to Pocahontas. This stuff ties to the story of David. This stuff ties to there's brothers killing each other in the Iliad. So that lets you know that has to do with Cain and Abel in certain ways. I mean, it's all the same thing. And then when you go from Cain and Abel, it's the same idea when Joseph was not liked by any of his brothers. The same idea goes on with Isaac and Esau, I believe, were the two. Esau and Jacob. Jacob and Esau. They were twins. They fought their whole lives. Jacob was the trickster. Jacob tricked Esau into selling his birthright. Now that goes down, and then you go even further, and they use that implication that black people sold their birthright to white people, or the people we consider to be black sold their birthright or their land. Indians sold their birthright or their land to the European. I mean, it's all the same stuff. This stuff just keeps reenacting and reenacting. If people don't dig deep and see the historical significance and the historical deception that's being used in both. Now let's get back. When Paris the shepherd saw this group approaching, he was afraid and tried to run away. But Hermes told him that Zeus had given orders and Paris should obey. Each of the goddesses talked about their beauty. One version says Hermes told them to undress, so as Paris could judge better, and then promised gifts should be chosen. Hera promised him power over all Asia. Athena promised him wisdom and victory in all the battles, while Aphrodite promised to give him as a wife the most beautiful woman on earth, and that was Helen, who was already married to King Menelaus. As you can see, it wasn't exactly a beauty contest because, in fact, um, oh, I skipped. Without hesitation, Paris declared Aphrodite, who promised him the most beautiful woman on earth, Aphrodite as the most beautiful. Then waited for his reward. I have read that she had washed her hair with water from the river Scamander. That's you have to read about the river of Scamander. It's also it was believed that the fountain of youth was near the river of Scamander and so many other things. Because of the water, that water gave her hair red reflexes so as to appear even more beautiful. As you can see, it wasn't exactly a beauty contest because in fact Paris had judged the quality of the gifts, more exactly bribes, given by the three goddesses, which means the very first beauty contest in history was not fair at all. And I'm sure that follows the same thing with every beauty contest afterward. That's part of the symbolic meaning in the story. Later, goddess Aphrodite kept her word and helped Prince Paris kidnap Helen. That's the discrepancy between her being Helen of Troy, which is the wife of Paris, or Helen of Sparta, which was when she was the wife of Menelaus. The consequences of Paris's choice appeared very soon. That's why Zeus refused to judge in the first place. By deciding that Aphrodite was the most beautiful, he made enemies out of Hera and Athena, which Hera and Athena helped Menelaus the whole way through the war. And so how did the judgment of Paris cause the Trojan War? When Helen chose Menelaus as her husband, all the other suitors vowed to defend him should anyone offend his honor. When his wife was kidnapped, they all gathered their armies and went to war against Troy. Eris must have been more than pleased, as she probably didn't have such an outcome in her mind when she started at all. So, I mean, man, this is some serious information about mythology and how mythology affects. Now, people argue over whether the Trojan War occurred. But one thing is for sure that there were wars at that time between the people who lived in Sparta and the people who lived in Greece. So, I mean, man, people deny this stuff. There's something wrong with them. Now, similar to the kidnapping of Pocahontas causing war between the natives and settlers, the kidnapping of Helen of Sparta and consequential marriages both seem to be more symbolic than historical. Okay. In order to explain this, I have to put on my metaphysics jacket. I need to get into the beyond physics, beyond science part. Many argue whether or not the Iliad or Trojan War ever occurred, or whether it was a collection of wars that may or may not have been related to the myth of Helen of Troy. What cannot be argued is the fact that Greeks conquered and inhabited the land we consider to be ancient Troy, or Anatolia is another name for it, which is in modern-day Turkey. Metaphysically, land is representative of a female or feminine aspects because crops are grown from the earth and resources are extracted from Mother Earth, just like a woman giving birth. So the earth can't be male, even though we know that in ancient Egyptian or Kemetic the god Geb is the god of the earth, or he represents the earth. But every single Egyptian god has a female counterpart. So Geb had a female counterpart. Now, check. Another fact that cannot be argued is that the native land, or Pocahontas, was eventually conquered by settlers, colonists, or colonialists, whichever you prefer, who kidnapped and married or took the land for their own. So, I mean, man. Furthermore, all the resources extracted from this land, which is Pocahontas, or America, if you will, have been ever since divvied up by the settlers, colonists, colonialists, and portions kicked back to London, where John Smith was a soldier for the British Crown and eventually was laid to rest. So, I mean, metaphysically, that's letting you know that these stories are these myths are just showing you how they stole the land. That's really what it's about. Now, he was a soldier for the British Crown, just like Menelaus, who took his wife or land back, was a soldier for the Achaeans, or the Greeks, who took the land from the Spartans. I mean, man, it's crazy. This stuff's crazy, but I love it. I like to understand these things. Okay, I like to show you now. This is a common quote, a famous quote from Dan Brown. History is always written by the winners. When two cultures clash, the loser is obliterated and the winner writes the history books. Books which glorify their own cause and disparage the conquered foe. As Napoleon once said, what is history but a fable agreed upon? And I mean, this is true. It's mythology. But then another quote, I couldn't find this quote, but I know I read it somewhere. This quote is lies don't have legs to stand, but they have wings and fly everywhere. And that's just something that came to me. I would suggest to you that mythology itself is a direct result. Mythology itself is a direct result of cognitive dissonance and selective exposure. Uh, I like to thank people for listening in, and I like to get some comments. Let me know how what you think about this situation. What do you think about mythology and how it affects our psychology? All right, guys, have a good day. Once again, it's Curtis Washita, and I'm out.